live.
Oh, well, we're in. Okay.
We're in. Yep. My man, Kevin Foster.
What's happening, man? We've been talking about doing this for a while.
Very long time. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm glad we finally made it happen.
Yeah,
It only took a pandemic in order for us to have the time to do it.
Yeah, that's making the best of it, though. Yeah.
So typically we just exchange over Facebook, but I haven't been doing as much social media lately.
Likewise.
But I still see everything that you do, and one thing about you is I always respect your opinion. You always back it up. It's always very balanced, and you really you lay it out there for people, and you really give people that might feel a certain way, you really give them a voice and like a channel to express themselves. Like you express yourself for them, and they feel that opinion is being heard.
Yeah, I know what you mean. When I was coming up, my father is very expressive and had a lot of opinions. And his thing was always, stand for something, or you'll fall for anything.
Right.
So I've always grown up with strong opinions, but then you realize you don't know everything, you know. And I went through my 20s thinking I did. And like politically and socially, I'm kind of in the middle. There's some issues that I'm more conservative on. There's some other issues I'm more liberal on. But I find myself defending more of a left-leaning position because I think people get really emotional and they don't get like a balanced, kind of thoughtful opinion of what they're trying to say. And so I try to be that voice. And I'll say it now, but I don't want this to. This is going to be recorded. I'm not always right, and this is the only time I'm ever going to say that out loud. But
I've been telling you that for a long time.
That's the only time I know I'm right.
Is when I'm telling you.
When you disagree with me.
That's usually it's a good sign.
But no, I think that people are actually more alike than they want to admit.
100%.
And I think that people don't actually try to walk in the other person's shoes. They're so set on just having their one opinion because it's the only opinion they know, and it's being supported by the news service they watch. And that's either side of the aisle.
Yeah.
That I think we don't do enough talking to each other. We talk at each other, and we just regurgitate, the same talking points. And I think that's what I'm trying to do is encourage conversation.
And that's exactly why I enjoy podcasting.
Yeah.
That's 100%. I mean, I told you before, like that's why I see the value in long form podcasting.
Yeah.
Because it really is easy to get sucked into the, you can see when someone's commenting on something, almost like you could hear Tucker Carlson in what they're saying.
Yeah.
You can hear Don Lemon in what they're saying. Sometimes verbatim, really.
Yeah.
But it really takes the humanity out of it.
Yeah,
it really
it
just become like clashing clans of thought.
Yeah.
But one thing that I've always liked about like what you do is you'll invite differing opinions into the conversation. Now I've been on the wrong end of that a couple times. Where like I'm like, hey, I was invited. Then the whole party beats you up.
Yeah.
But that's I think that's okay. I like when somebody has a different opinion than me, because it makes me think about the issue. There was one thing that somebody told me a long time ago. It said, if two people are in the room and they both have the same opinion, then one of them is unnecessary. And I've always felt like it's not, I never want to be unnecessary.
Yeah.
Like I want to be able to contribute.
Yeah.
So sometimes that brings out the contrarian in me. I often will just take the opposite. Yeah. And then through the conversation, I even realize I'm like, oh, this is dumb. You're right. Like, but before we get into, because there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about.
I hear you.
Tell me a little bit about you, your background. I know you do stand-up comedy. You're a screenwriter. You're a former firefighter.
Yes, I am.
Right?
Yeah.
You do a lot. Just give me the rundown. Like who is the man, the myth, the legend?
A lot of myths. I was born a poor black child. No, I was born in Compton, born and raised in Compton, and it's funny. The Compton that I knew was not the Compton that is advertised. My neighborhood was all professionals, professional 2-parent families, and very nuclear, homes with the dogs and the 2.5 kids and the whole nine. I remember like when I had relatives come from the East Coast, and they're like, oh, they're going to stay with us for the summer or something. And they're like, oh, Compton, oh, and they get there and they're like, man, this ain't Compton. It's like, no, this is Compton too.
Right.
It's just the city of Compton is really just a bedroom community with some industry. Now there are some rough areas, but the rough areas don't dominate the city.
Right.
But being from Compton, you have to almost like live down this stereotype that it's that everybody there isn't a gang or a drug dealer or something like that. So I grew up with this kind of chip on my shoulder. I had a lot of insecurities to overcome. Being from Compton, people assuming that you're less than. Being black and having society assume you're less than. And then even within the black community, especially in the 70s and 80s, there was this whole light skin, dark skin thing. You know, and it goes back further. I mean, we could get really deep into that. That may be another show. But in the 70s and 80s, there was a preference, and it's almost like in South Africa when they had apartheid, they had that caste system where if you were black Afrikaner, then you were, you had no rights. If you were mixed and you were called colored, then you had some rights. And if you were white, you had all the rights. It kind of works that way in the U.S. Back then, in that if you were lighter skinned, you were assumed to be more intelligent, or more often than not, your family had more opportunities for education. Yeah. So there was a greater chance of you having a higher level of success. Clean up on all four.
Yeah.
So I grew up with those three things really kind of hindering me, well, they could have been hindrances, but instead they became kind of catalysts for growth. And I wanted to try different things. I didn't want to do things that people from Compton didn't do. I didn't want to be limited by societal by societal limitations and things like that. So I took up hobbies that were not traditional for my community. I was a snowboarder and skier before it was real big, and I was a cyclist. Was heavy into martial arts for a long time. When I was a kid, firefighters and police officers in Compton were primarily white, and most of the authority figures that I saw were white, except my dad was the first black general manager Volkswagen ever had. And my uncle, who lived right around the corner from us, was a big manager at Hughes Aircraft. So I had role models within my family that I knew could be leaders. So I didn't think that was a limitation, but I knew that I was going to have to work doubly hard to overcome a lot of the societal prejudices. Yeah. And I did. My diction, I worked really hard on vocabulary, and it became like detective work. It was fun for me.
So is that kind of what spawned like becoming a screenwriter later on? Did you read a lot?
I did not read a lot, but I wrote a lot, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron in a way. But I was a journalism student in college, so I got to write a lot. But I didn't read a lot. I kind of developed my own style from writing and being a fan of comedians. So my feature writing had a lot of infusion of humor and things like that in it. But no, screenwriting kind of came by chance. I was a firefighter, and when you're a firefighter, you have all these days off. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have a side hustle or a hobby, you're going to get in trouble because it's just too much time. Yeah. So I had a photography business, and I was shooting initially weddings, which I hated. And then I started shooting models and actors and actresses, and they have these headshots that they always have to update. Yeah. And that became my staple.
Dude, the wedding thing, those are the hardest, most stressful.
I'll never do it again.
Like, I've done a couple wedding videos, but it's the most unbelievable stressful thing.
You got one shot to help these people make their memories.
That's it.
And it's always when you have the perfect shot, where you've lined up the perfect candid shot, no one knows you're there, and then like Aunt Cece comes and grabs your arm right before you can hit the shutter release.
Aunt Cece every time.
Oh my God.
Every time.
Or the tension is so high that the bride is crying and you can't get the shot you want because her eyes are red and puffy, you know. Or there's always some tension. There's always a relative.
That's really good as Gabby
Oh gosh, yeah.
She does amazing work.
Yeah, she is amazing. She's amazing in a lot of ways. But no, you can have that wedding stuff, man.
Yeah.
But the actress stuff I liked because it gave me a lot of creativity.
She said she loves wedding.
Oh, but now it gave me avenues for creativity, and then I made some friends, and I had a friend, Jasmine Lewis. She's still my friend. We've been friends for blah 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 years, like actually 30 plus years, and she was getting scripts for these major motion pictures that she was up for, and I would read them and go, "This isn't that great," and she would go, "Well, yeah, I know, but can you think you have some ideas? You're funny. You have some ideas that might punch that up a little bit." And I would give her things, and she would take them into her readings, and sometimes it'd help her get parts, or if she was on a show, they might change the dialogue. And she was really the one that gave me the impetus to start writing, because she was like, you can do this.
Yeah. So what age did you start writing? Because
I was in my 30s. I was in my 30s. I was probably like 33, 34, and I was still firefighting, so I had a career. Writing was kind of a side hobby.
So you didn't start writing till 30s?
Uh-huh.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't start writing until my 30s. And I didn't go to film school or any of that stuff. I had some scripts from some of my actor friends. And then I got a book by Sid Field. And it was a book on screenwriting. And it gave me some breakdowns on structure and, timing. And
screenwriting is not easy.
It's not.
It's very, very difficult.
It's not. And I think you can learn how to do it, but it has to be kind of natural. And you have to, it's like anything, it's like a sport. It's like jujitsu. You learn the foundation, and then you can get creative once with the transitions, once you've got a sound base, a foundation. Yeah. And script writing is the same way. If you have the formula and you have the format and you know how to create a character arc and stuff like that.
Well, you have to be interested in it, right? So it's like, like it's not just the hours you put into learning, it's all of the other hours of the day. What are you thinking about through those hours? Because that's where you really develop. So like for me, cinematography has always been a thing that I really enjoy. Yeah. So when I watch a movie, I watch it differently than when I did before I was interested. So screenwriting, you might actually like see, like how it might look on paper, or how and then you try to, differentiate like what's probably was on paper and then what's probably happened afterwards, or what's improvised. And yeah, I mean, because then you get into that whole Tarantino-esque thing where like he's very much like, if it's not on the page, don't read it. I pay you to do exactly what's on the page. Yeah. And some people are like, hey, this is the starting point. If I hired DiCaprio, I want you to put something on top of it. Where do you find yourself there? I've
seen it both ways. I have had scripts of mine read, like acted out or read, where the actor brought something completely different to it that I didn't see. You know what I mean? I write for a TV show now called Monogamy. Right. Craig Ross Jr.'s Monogamy. Right. And it's on the UMC network. And there was an actress, Vanessa Simmons, that brought a vulnerability to this character that I didn't see. And when I saw it play out, I was like, wow, that's actually better. Yeah. And then I've had other times when an actor is almost in my head. Christy Ferris is an actress that I love working with for that reason. I don't know how she does it. She's just extremely intuitive. Yeah. But it seems like anything that I write for her, she sees it exactly as I saw it. Yeah. And when she delivers it, it's scary as to how accurate it is to my vision. Now, directors also have their own vision. So you supply them with the script, and the hardest thing for a writer to do is now divorce yourself from it. Because they're going to make changes. So are you involved in the actual shooting of it? Like, do you stick around to see what happens? I like to go on set a couple of days just to see how, some of the things, kind of matriculate. I also like to see, it makes me cringe a little bit sometimes when actors ad lib on a line that I know works. You know what I mean? Especially like a joke. Because, I write comedy. That's what I do. Yeah. So if I write a joke, I know how I want it to play out. And then I have an actor that might change the line, and it changes the timing of the joke. So Gabby wants to know what motivated you to start writing at 30. It was a challenge more than anything else. It was something that I thought that I could do as well as the stuff that I was looking at. Yeah. And I thought, you know what? I've never done this. Let me give it a shot. And I kind of took to it. Sounds like me in podcasting. Yeah, it is. I mean, because you see everyone else do it, and you're like, you know what? Okay, I kind of see what that
probably entails.
Yeah.
Then you start scratching at it.
Yeah.
And slowly you go, you know what? Like this is, but it has to, at some point, even if it's a challenge, like say if, becoming a mountain climber is a challenge and you're a month into training, you're not into it.
Yeah. Drop it.
You drop it. Right?
Yeah.
But like, so at some point, like it was a challenge, but then you were like, I'm digging it.
Yeah. And you make a very good point. At some point, someone has to validate it for you.
Right.
Someone saw your podcast and went, you're really good at this.
No, not yet. But,
not yet?
But was that it?
Yeah. I had some people go, you're good at this. Yeah.
No. For me, were you giving me that? Were you validated? Because I need it. I've been waiting for it for very long.
Yeah, he's slipping me money under the table. Yes, this is the best podcast I have ever been.
There you go. That's worth at least. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I when I got validation from actors, like if they were on a show, a good show, I mean a network TV show, and they give me a script, and then I would like change a line or two for them, and they take it in, and the line would work. And I'd be in the tester audience or something that day, and I could see this joke that I wrote get laughs. Yeah. It was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. So yeah, it was the validation.
So what about the and this is something that very interesting to me is the stand-up comedy aspect. So I'm gonna guess that especially being from Compton, and I find sometimes when you have a rough childhood, comedy becomes a conduit, right?
Yeah.
At least it was for me.
Yeah.
Comedy is very near and dear to my. But I'm guessing you were kind of into like the old school, Steve Martin, Richard Pryor,
George Carlin,
Eddie
Bruce.
Murphy.
Yeah.
So even a little bit before. So Lenny Bruce. I haven't really seen too much of his stuff. I've heard people talk about Lenny Bruce more than I've seen Lenny Bruce. I've only watched a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'm 57, dude.
You're a couple years older than me.
I've seen Sammy Davis Jr. live.
How do you really?
Yeah. Yeah. Best performer I've ever seen. Him, really? James Brown, and Michael Jackson. The three best performers I've ever seen do anything ever.
Saw Clapton. I thought that was amazing.
Well, yeah. That's
boring, but it was
that's
amazing.
A different kind of amazing.
Yeah.
I can listen to Clapton all day long. The B.B. King album with him, that he did with B.B. King. I can listen to that all day long.
You ever see Hendrix?
No, I never saw Hendrix. Just on tape. Just on tape. But
So comedy. So who is the first stand-up comedy you've ever saw live?
Flip Wilson.
Flip Wilson. I've heard that.
Flip Wilson had a show. When I was a kid in the early 70s, there weren't a lot of black folks on TV. And Flip Wilson had his own show. It was a variety show, kind of like, there were a lot of variety shows back then. Carol Burnett had one. Sonny and Cher had one.
Yeah.
His show came on I want to say Wednesday night. And in my house, that was nothing happened when the Flip Wilson show was on. And he was hilarious. And he didn't just do, what they would call race comedy back then. He was very intelligent and topical, and he pushed boundaries, and he did a lot of things that I really appreciated. And also, ironically, Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was like the comedy genius back then. And he could get on stage and ad-lib a whole hour just from pulling kids out of the stage and talking to them.
Yeah.
He was amazing. But Richard Pryor was the first comedian that I actually heard. And I heard him through record albums back in the day. He used to make comedy albums.
What's that?
Like literally LPs, like the records. This is before cassettes and before CDs.
This is before MP3? I know what an album is.
Yeah. The Beatles used to make these things.
Yeah. I heard they sound really good, I think. Somebody said that.
They had different speeds even.
So you've been doing, how long have you been doing comedy?
Not long. Long.
Because I've seen some of the videos, and you're doing it pretty consistently now.
I was until this stuff started coming up, until COVID-19.
Yeah. But you're doing spots at where do you go? Where have you performed?
There are a ton of clubs in North Hollywood, Burbank area.
Yeah.
I mean, a ton of clubs.
Yeah.
The one I like working the most is called Flappers, and it's in Burbank. They have open mic nights. They have Comedy University, where you can go and actually learn how to,
Really?
Yeah.
Have you ever taken an improv class or a stand? Okay.
Never. And I have a lot of friends that are comedians.
Yeah.
And I've written jokes for comedians and things like that.
Do you have the friends that are not comedians that go oh, you're a comedian now? tell me a joke. And you're like, it doesn't work that way. And
Yeah.
you're like, come on, you're a comedian. And you're
Yeah,
like,
it's a lot of pressure once you say that you, or once people know that you've been on stage, because like they want you to perform at everything. Like, you know, if you go to like the Memorial Day barbecue, and then it's, hey Kevin, tell some jokes. And it's like it's not how it
like
works.
that.
Yeah.
Now, some people, if you're a Mitch Hedberg or somebody, you could literally do that. You could,
Yeah.
you could start spouting off those jokes.
Yeah,
Like my roommate asked me if I want a frozen banana.
Yeah.
I said no, but I want a regular banana later. So, yeah.
yeah, and
You know,
that's what I mean.
like-
And there are several different types of comedians.
Yeah.
And I'm a storyteller. I'm not
Right.
a joke teller.
Right.
Rodney Dangerfield is probably the best joke teller that I've
By the
seen.
end of this podcast, we are going to kill that freaking fly.
I know, right?
There's one fly in here, and it is driving me crazy.
Well, we know he's not racist because he bothered you first.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
He's an equal opportunity fly.
Yeah, at least one of those.
Yeah. But no, when I was a kid, Rodney Dangerfield would go on the Johnny Carson show.
Rodney
And-
Dangerfield was amazing.
Yeah, and my dad, would let me stay up to watch it. If Rodney Dangerfield was on, my dad would let me stay up. Rodney would, start tugging it. Hey,
No respect. No respect.
And he had jokes like, you had to really be paying attention, because he would deliver them rapid fire.
Yeah.
But he would say things like, my wife, she can't cook. At my house, the flies chipped in to fix the screen door. And you're going, oh, I get it, because flies want to come in the house and hang by the food.
Yeah.
Well, not if the wife can't cook.
Yeah.
Or he said, what was a favorite joke I used to always tell? He said, I had no luck with girls. The girl told me, hey, Rodney, come over. There's nobody home. I went over. There was nobody home. And I would retell his stuff and at school, and to the kids who weren't allowed to stay up, to watch Carson.
Right.
And I liked the laughs that I got from them.
There's something very, very rewarding about making somebody else laugh.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And that's usually what gets me in trouble.
Yeah, same.
Because I tend to be, I don't know what the word is, but like, I don't want to say politically incorrect because it sounds very specific. But basically just like say things that are like what did he just say? What I think he said?
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's like the setting isn't right for that type of joke, or
Yeah.
and I do like a lot of like suit and tie things, in the community.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like my inner child, like, cause I'm a lover of stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Like if there's one thing that if I'm in a funk, like it doesn't happen often,
Yeah.
but I already know what's going to get me out of it.
Yeah.
I go to the comedy store.
Exactly.
I go,
Yeah.
and the very next day, I feel fantastic.
Yeah.
Because there's something, the old saying, cliche, but laughter is the best medicine.
It is.
I remember I was feeling in a funk, and I went and saw my favorite comedian, Norm Macdonald.
Yeah.
And I sat front row.
Norm is a comedian's comedian too.
Yeah.
Comedians
He is.
go watch him.
Yeah, comedians, like, you don't hear too many people saying bad things about Norm Macdonald.
No.
And he he gets in trouble here and there, but it almost seems so innocent because he is a comedian.
Yeah.
And I feel like comedians need a pass.
They do.
They need that because they're supposed to say things that are thought provoking.
Yeah.
And try to find the funny in tragedy. That's comedy.
Yeah.
But I saw him, and I was front row. My face hurt for 3 days.
Yeah.
Like the muscles. I thought there might have been something wrong because I laughed so hard.
Yeah.
For 3 days, my face was tender to the touch. And I'm like, that's what it's all about right
Yeah.
now. That's addictive.
Comedians are just paid observers. That's what they really are. They have a way of expressing like some of the strangest nuances and the littlest things that us regular folk just don't pick up.
Well, it's almost like their job is to report back to us the things that we can't see because we're so inside the game that we don't see the crazy, how idiotic most things are.
Yeah.
And they report back, and really the reason why comedy is such an art because the things that make us laugh the most are the things that are the most true, but we didn't think about it till that moment.
Yeah.
And when we've realized that moment, that's crazy, it's almost like a relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we feel like, wow, like this thing that's so, a part of my life, I just realized is so light.
Yeah.
And you feel the lightness.
Yeah, that's the thing. I've often said that comedians are like the world's pressure relief valve.
Right.
And yeah, we like like this great comic. Comedians should be given some creative license.
But you got to like with that. I bet you I know there's comedians that we would say are definitely in that community where they would say we and it would make sense. They still feel like, well, I'm not Lenny Bruce. I'm not, I don't want to say like us comedians because I'm not Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't matter where you're at in it. Like the community is formed by people that relate to the community.
Yeah.
So I think weed is definitely
semi-appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel guilty saying it because I know comedians that, like I have a buddy, Alex Thomas. He has like this comedy brand, The Funny Don't Stop. Guy has been working, like grinding for like 25, 30 years.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's kind of like me with fighting. I did a few amateur fights.
Yeah.
I fought one pro fight. I don't go around saying like as my belt sitting there. My bullshit meter's gonna go off. I don't go around,
belt over the shoulder eating Cheerios with the kids.
I don't flaunt it. But there's people like JJ Ambrose. Like guys who just like the amount of time and effort I've dedicated pales in comparison.
Yeah.
Gabe Green. Who's fighting this weekend?
I heard.
Deal,
yeah,
man.
how
It's
about
huge.
that? Signed in the UFC.
And those guys are dedicating their lives to this craft.
Yes.
I enjoy the heck out of it, and I get something out of it, and I love being a part of the community, and I feel like I've been a part of the community long enough to really kind of appreciate it on a level above like a regular fan.
Sure.
But when I talk about like MMA fighters, those are the guys I think of, not me.
No, I'm the same way, and I feel that way about comedy as well. I have a couple of really close friends that I have just seen do it. Really do it.
Yeah.
Alonzo Bowden is another one.
Yeah, he won the what's that show?
Yeah, now I'm gonna
Last Comic Standing.
I'm bragging about him being my close friend. I can't think of the name of the show. Yeah, Last Comic Standing.
Right?
Yeah, but the guy is here's another quality that seems like most really good comedians have. They're embarrassingly smart.
Yeah.
Really, really smart. If you're having dinner with Alonzo, for instance, you're going to talk about world affairs, and you're going to be talking to a guy who can document like world events from like World War I and how it portrays as something now.
Well, because it's all content, right? It's all
Exactly.
you have to have the raw material to pick from in order to have words to put on.
Yeah.
To make something funny.
Yeah, and then he's been doing stand up for decades upon decades. So I've seen him where he's working an audience and he tries something new and it catches fire, and then he does the rest of a 30-minute set on stuff he's coming off the top of his head, but he's got such a repertoire of material to pull from after being on the road for decades and hosting jazz cruises and comedy festivals in Montreal and things like that. That guy's got an encyclopedia of stuff.
What is it with Montreal? Because they used to do the Just for Laughs thing, and when you watch those, they have like the all-star lineup of anybody who's anybody. Do you think there's something to like the Canadian comedy scene? Because I could probably think of at least half a dozen comedians that are Canadian that like. There must be a really big comedy scene up there. Yeah,
I think it's very free flowing too, in that they don't have as many boundaries. But down here we're trying to do stuff that sells a lot. Yeah. And I think up there they're trying to do stuff that's unique and different. Well,
what's crazy? I think of one person that comes to mind is like Tom Green, right? Who was one of the pioneers of podcasting. Pioneer, like he did a lot of things first.
Yeah.
And now with COVID, he started his podcast again at his house, and it's really just like him just around his house, like doing his thing, and it's just like doesn't care, but it's just like his personality is funny and engaging.
Yeah. And
there's a difference between a good comedian and an infectious personality. I'm not saying Tom Green is, but there's something to like when a good comedy special comes out. And like they're great, like on stage, like they have great jokes and they're funny, compared to somebody who you feel like you just put a camera in front of them and they're just gonna just kill it. Like,
Yeah.
so, you know, he's probably not the best example these days, but, you know, Bill Cosby's, you know, an
Yeah.
example.
Unfortunately.
You know, but I think of people like, you know, Jerry Seinfeld, maybe. I think he's funny, like,
Yeah.
but he's a very serious individual, and he could probably pull out jokes like that.
Yeah.
But he's a great stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
And now, as opposed to say, I guarantee if you Dave Chappelle, I think he great stand-up comedian, but I think just on camera, it's entertaining, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, you want more, you know.
Jerry Seinfeld is an architectural comedian.
Yeah.
He builds a joke and then hones it and shapes it and reshapes it until it becomes the perfect. I mean, he may start out with a concept that he works for years before he whittles it down to one.
That's insane.
Specific. Yeah, it is.
Now,
but
what kind are you?
I'm off the cuff storyteller, and I'm lucky in that I've had a varied life experience.
Yeah.
You know, I've done the fighting thing. You know, I've done been the bullied kid. You know, I grew up in an area that was thought to be tough, but the areas around me were tough. You know, I've had the racial stuff. I've had, you know, I've been on both sides of the political aisle. I've traveled all over the world. So I have had a lot of interest, and I've involved myself in a lot of different categories and a lot of activities. So I can talk relatively intelligently about a lot of different things. So I can address a lot of different audiences and find something in common with them, or find something that resonates with them from a funny standpoint. Like,
Right.
a lot of male comedians can't talk to women about women stuff, you know, but I have mostly female friends. So
does it make, and this is an honest question, and it's a debate I've had with my wife a lot, and I'm going to say this, and as a soundbite, it's not going to sound good.
I hear you.
Okay. I don't like female comedians.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I'm not saying not as people, just like,
Yeah.
and I think that it's okay.
Uh-huh.
It's all about when you have an experience, right? Like the way, don't get me wrong, there's some female comedians that I've laughed very hard at what
Sure.
they're joking about, but there is something to say about, you have to, it's an intimate exchange of, like, you had to have experienced what they're talking about to get the release of the joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, a lot of, and you know what it is? Let me rephrase. I don't like female comedians that talk explicitly, or like the raunchy ones where, but like, then I had this like epiphany. I'm like, oh, this is how women have felt with the guys grabbing their junk and making, you know, stupid jokes the whole time. Like, it's not because the comedian's not funny. It's because they can't relate.
Yeah, there are things I like. For me, it's not women comedians, because I find a lot of them funny. Because like, again,
some are very funny. It's just it's the content when, and this comes back to like identity comedy, kind of like identity politics. It's like, if the content of the comedy is about the identity, then it takes my experience out of the equation, as opposed to, say, you know, a good storytelling comedian like Richard Pryor, who's probably one of the best storytelling comedians ever. You know, like, you don't need to know what it's like to be high on meth and caught on fire to know, like, this is a funny story.
Exactly.
But when it comes, you know, but then some comedians focus so much on the identity aspect of things, where you're like, I can't put myself in anywhere here to you know.
Yeah, and for me, because, you know, I'm you know, I've written, you know, romantic comedies and things like that, so I'm trained to kind of put myself in the female body so the female can talk through me on the script.
Yeah.
So I do a better job with female comedians. You know what it was for me? It was women rappers.
Yeah.
I could not deal. It used to bug me to hear female rappers all the time. And Queen Latifah and MC Lyte changed that for me.
She, you know, I was watching her the other day, and I was thinking that this was like what I was like. She was, I think, the only person, at least that I could think of at the time when I watched it the other day, that did it right, where it was believable.
Yeah.
It was like, it didn't feel like an imposter.
Yeah.
She like was doing it justice, and like that's really what it is.
Well, I think what happened was, there was a time, you know, and I came in, you know, rap's inception, you know, when rap was new in the, you know, 76 and 7. But I remember like the Roxanne Shantays, and they were just like copycat rappers. They had this formula and they
Did you ever do any rap?
Oh God, no.
No?
That's
I
the
was
last
in
thing
a
you
rap
want me to
band. Can you believe that?
You're kidding me.
I was in a rap
You're
band.
blacker than I am.
I am. It might be the lighting.
Yeah,
I'm probably the palest. I actually was looking at self-tanner the other day because from doing these podcasts, I realized that like I basically have to change the camera settings just because I'm so white. Like it's terrible.
You're almost clear.
I'm almost clear. But no, I was in we played the Key Club. We played it was Longwood. It was like Lakewood, Long Beach. And
It sounds kind of sexual, but
yeah, I know.
Double
well,
entendre.
we were like 20, and then but featuring Deluxe, and like Deluxe was like the rapper. He was like the front man.
Yeah.
And we would like basically do raps back. It was kind of like a Beastie Boys kind of thing.
Sure.
But it was fun, man.
Yeah.
Like
No, I never.
It's a different vibe.
I never. That was a road I would never tread. Never gave it a thought.
But I would think you'd do amazing at it.
Well,
to be honest,
I have
like,
done it as like a joke.
Well, like writing rap is so. I'm not saying it's easy, right? Because some people, I would never be able to write like an Eminem like flow or something.
Yeah.
But there is something poetic about just being able to like put it all out there.
Yeah, a good writer should be able to write pretty much anything. Like I've written songs, and I'm not a musician, so I can hear the music in my head, but I can write lyrics and things like that. So yeah, I have written rap lyrics, but I am not a rap performer.
Yeah.
I think that's one of those things that everyone thinks they can do well, but not a lot of people can. I think it's harder than it looks.
Oh yeah.
Comedy is one of those things too. I think, like you
everyone thinks they could do comedy.
Well, yeah.
So I did 3 shows, right? And I would say one was good, one was okay. And it's like I think I'm doing. Maybe I might be telling the porridge and the bear story. Actually, I might get those mixed up. But then one was terribly bad. I'll tell you my opening joke. Okay. Hey everybody, and this is like back when I was like a little bit buffer, right?
Yeah.
And I've always wore tight shirts, right? And I was like, hey everybody, I know what you're thinking. No, I don't do steroids, but yes, this is my little brother's shirt. And I just I was like playing off that.
Yeah, self-deprecating humor.
Yeah. Yeah, but it didn't. The one show was okay, and honestly, like I did it as a challenge, kind of like what you were saying earlier. It was like I want to see if I could do it, because when somebody brought the opportunity up to me, because they're like, hey, I'm booking a show, would you want to do 15 minutes? I was like, that scared the crap out of me, and my compass goes
15 minutes is a lot.
Yeah, my compass goes, if it scares me, I kind of have to do it.
Yeah, same here.
Like it was the same thing with fighting, the same thing with I have to do it.
Yeah.
And
or tell me I can't do it, and that makes me want to do it even more.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it was the best. But it is one of those things where like I've comedian friends, they go up and they'll tell the same set 100 times, because like they're getting it down. It's like the difference between going up and pulling it off a little bit than really doing it, being a comedian, putting in that miles.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes like, you can do a 7-minute set, and where you're telling maybe 8 stories in 7 minutes, and 3 of them hit, the other 5 don't.
It's it's the hardest part is rebounding from the one that flops, right? Because you have to reset. So you have to have like your I'm telling you, you're the one who does it. But I just remember the feeling of like when a joke flopped. Like I told this really bad joke about a stalker, and it just flopped, and just like. I remember like that was the show where I got off after like 5 minutes, because I was like, I can't do anything. Yeah. Like I lost them. Like they think I'm an idiot. I'm going to get off now. Like they figured me out. I'm done.
Dude, comedy, they say insanity is trying to, expecting a different result, doing the same thing. I have done a 7:00 show where just killed. I mean, people holding themselves, and you're just, and you won't let them go. You just hit them with line, and you leave. Good night, and then people are like, oh, please sign my. You want an autograph? And then you go up the street and do the 10:00 show. Same bit. You got the same energy. Nothing.
Just different vibe.
Critics.
Who goes on before you? Who goes on after? The mood. It's interesting, man. I celebrate the comedian lifestyle. And that's why I'm such a big fan of the comedy club, because it's the only place that I've gone where I feel like the walls can, if these walls could talk, and also the comedians are so accessible. Like, he wasn't my favorite comedian, but I remember going 3 times, maybe. I went to the Comedy Store, and Kirk Fox, I don't know if you know who he is.
No.
He's done a couple of B movies, but he's a really funny guy. He's like a regular there, but he just kind of hangs out by the bar. And so I've talked to him every time.
Yeah.
Every time, you know, he's not the headliner, but
Yeah.
he's getting up there.
Yeah.
I think he just did Bulletproof 2. You know,
Uh-huh,
remember
yeah.
Bulletproof 1 was
exactly.
like with like Damon Wayans, I think. But he's climbing. But and then, you know, I shot him a message. I'm starting to sound like a stalker, but this is the joke. Yeah, and then he messages back, and like just like it's cool because you feel like there is that community there, and I think that's really important. I'm sure it's at other clubs too.
Yeah, but it's a lot like what you said. It's comedians you identify with. Like there are formula comedians, and those are the ones. I don't care what you are, white, black, Jewish, male, female, plaid, doesn't matter. If you do the same kind of stuff, and you think that's when you lose me. So like you were mentioning, and I've heard a lot of guys say that they don't like female comics because they don't identify what they're talking about.
Right.
And the formula ones will talk a lot about sex and bad relationships with guys, you know, and a lot of times how they get either not satisfied or mistreated in a sexual relationship. It goes right to sex really early. Okay, you're gonna lose me because that just tells me that you're not that inventive, and there's a whole world of topics you can touch on.
Yeah,
and that's all you're gonna do. Or the same with with black comedians, and their whole bit is how not white they are. Like black guys do this and white guys do that.
I have a thing against. I like self-deprecating humor, especially as an icebreaker, because I understand it, and it humanizes the experience, makes it you can accept it more. But I don't buy like the beta male kind of comedy. I used to really like it until I realized there was something about it that I didn't like, where it's basically just talking about how like it's like Mark Maron's a great example. I like Mark Maron. I think he's a funny comedian. But it became this like they were making jokes based on what they think people will think is funny at the time, and it just became almost so self-deprecating that it was like it didn't feel like it was their comedy. It was like, hey, I think you're gonna laugh at this joke, so I'm gonna tell you this joke now. Yeah. And it's just like, dude, I don't want you to guess at what I think is funny. I want you to be funny. Yeah. And if I like it, I'm gonna eat it up.
Yeah. I worked Flappers one night when there were 3 guys that I was like number 5 slot, right? The host went first and did a bit. Then there was like the 2, 3, and 4 guys were all the same guy. They were all like a 30-year-old, kind of smarmy, kind of pudgy, milk toast-ish Jewish guys. And they all talked about like Jewish guilt and how unsuccessful they were with women.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like this, like the I just think of the term beta male. Like it's like this anti-masculinity, like, oh, I'm such a loser and I'm so terrible with women and I haven't had a date in 10 years. And it's just like, come on.
Yeah.
Like you're making me feel more sorry for you.
Yeah.
Like either that or it's just a bit. Either way, you're taking me out of the experience.
Well, that's what happened. I went up and I had a 7-minute, and I had a tight 7-minute routine that I knew would do well in that audience and stuff. Because I'd worked Flappers enough where I kind of knew their audience.
Yeah.
And I went up after that, and I was like, I got on stage, and I just like looked at the audience for a second, like, my God, that was depressing. And everybody started laughing. Because isn't
that kind of a no-no though?
It is, but I didn't care.
Right.
It's like I was thinking this is going to sound terrible, but I was thinking none of those 3 guys could kick my ass.
Right.
What's the worst that
based
could happen?
on what they just said? I'm fine. I don't need anybody to walk me to my car.
But I did like the first 3 minutes where I was like, "Has anybody else actually had sex in the last 3 years?" Yeah. I mean, it was like therapy. Yeah. It's like I feel like I should come here and just vent. And so I did like an ad lib bit for about 3 minutes, and the audience got on my side. And then I did like like you said, you have to have like your go-to. Yeah. So I know I only had like 3 minutes left. So I went to like an opener that I knew worked, and I went with a closer because they flash that light in your face. Yeah. And I went with a closer that I knew worked, and everybody was like, "Oh, dude, it was such a breath of fresh air to have you come up there because it was a downer." And there are shows on a couple networks that I don't want to mention because I still get work from them. Okay. But I have turned down writing gigs because they want to emasculate the males. or
So that's a thing, right? Like that's an industry thing.
Well,
So
yeah.
that, and also to degrade parents, right? So again, it kind of plays into like the narrative, like basically taking a big crap on the nuclear family.
Yeah.
And like I was just talking about this the other day. It was, back in the day of like the shows, my back in the day, TGI Fridays, like those back in the,
Yeah.
like Boy Meets World. The structure is very simple. Opening, set the scene. Boy creates a mess, right? Can't fix it. Eventually, his parents give him some advice.
Yeah.
He reluctantly takes advice. Things turn out better. Thank you, parents. And then the happy ending.
Yeah.
Now it's like the opposite. It's like basically the kids teaching the parents how to be like what's right and wrong. That the dad is always some like, POS who's just like walking around just trying to keep up, and it sucks that like that's what we're instilling.
Yeah.
And it's hard to having two little girls. It's like, I don't know, like I don't. It's not Mr. Rogers. It's not like things that. It's not the Wonder Years. It's not Family Matters. It's not these things that like you feel like they're watching like what a mom and dad are supposed to do, or what a family support system is supposed to be, and like teaching them through the medium of film.
Yeah,
which I think is important.
It's very different. And like I came up in an era way before you.
Right.
In my era, child abuse came at the child abuse charge came after the autopsy. There was no, you got a spanking, so you report your parents to the thing. There were some beatings going on that were beyond. Now, not in my house. My father was such a master at saying things that would make you not want to ever do it again, that we didn't have to have a whole lot of spankings, but we got a few.
Right.
And I had one memorable one that just changed my life, and I was a good kid from pretty much that point on. But my father would do things like, I remember I think I saw like the Brady Bunch episode where Bobby and Cindy ran away, and got the idea that that's what a kid my age of like 7 or 8 could do. That was an option. If you didn't want to do what your parents had put you up to do, if you didn't want to do your chores or whatever the case, if they put you on punishment, you could run away as an option to kind of get back at them.
Oh, I used to tell my dad all the time, like, I'm going to call child services. And he'd just hand me the phone. So like, go.
And that's,
I'm out. Do you know the number?
That's the way to handle it. Yeah. I remember I told my parents once that I was going to run. I threatened to run away. And my father was reading the newspaper, and he folded the newspaper down, looked at me and went, "Son, you don't have to run away. You can walk away."
Yeah.
And I was like,
that's scary.
Yeah, at 7, like, I knew he was kind of okay if I didn't want to live under those rules.
Yeah.
And I kind of think he meant it. I'm not sure.
My
but
dad
I didn't try to find out.
My dad did.
And the same thing like the big sex talk. I didn't get the big birds and the bees talk. My father basically told me, "Look, you get a girl pregnant, you can't stay here because I can't have 2 fathers in my house." It was simple as that. And I went, wow. And then the times in like high school and college where you didn't have protection, and the girl's like, "Oh, it's okay." I was thinking, you know what? My father will kick me out of the house.
Yeah.
As cute as you are and as bad as I want it, nah, I'm gonna pass.
Yeah.
But the parents that they project on TV now project the society that we live in now. And in my day, if the teacher called home, the kid got in trouble.
Right.
Now, if the teacher calls home, the teacher gets in trouble.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you have over-reporting. Like my son, we had a situation at my son's school where he basically told the teacher that if he, got frustrated with her and told her, if I bring a C home, my parents will kick my ass.
Yeah.
And got reported to child services.
Wow.
Yeah, because the language,
right.
black parents talk like that.
Yeah.
We don't. There's a very colorful language we use because it came from our parents. Our parents. I can't tell you the names that I was called, but I never took any of them personally because they were told in like a humorous way. It was kind of Richard Pryor-ish, and I did the same. And my kids did take it personally. But if you said it to the wrong person, they would think, "Oh, wait a minute, there's some actual abuse going on there." And once they start that ball rolling, you can't stop it. You got to go through the procedures.
Yeah, we dealt with that a lot with my brothers. I have 6 brothers, and we had a lot of like my brothers would basically make false claims of abuse. There was no abuse going on in the house. Maybe some mental. I mean, but it wasn't what they thought.
Yeah.
But that's tough because then, like, as the man of the house, you have this stranger in your house basically telling you what you can and can't do. And I'm an anti-spanker. Like I'm an anti, like, I not that I don't think, like, I mean, I got my hand slapped, my butt slapped a couple times, and I didn't see it as abuse.
Yeah.
But man, having girls would change that real quick.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there has, like, the communication, it's all communication, right? So a butt slap is just communicating you did something wrong. So I think there's more responsibility to, do that in just different times.
Yeah.
Just different times.
But my father would tell me, like, I beat your ass so the police don't have to.
Right.
And there was some truth to that, especially in my day, because the police were a lot rougher, and there was no videoing, and so there was no recourse. It was
that leads us into a more hot topic here. But before we go down that, so you're, once COVID's over, you're still gonna be doing some stand-up comedy?
I can't wait to get back on stage.
Yeah,
I can't wait. I got into comedy to help my writing, because it helps. It makes the joke writing more efficient, because I can write dialogue heavy for scripts, and when you have a punchline, when you have a laugh you want to get, you got to get to that laugh quicker, and that's what comedy has taught me. Comedy has really, made me streamline a lot of the things that I would ordinarily say. So that's why I started doing it. But now it's kind of a bug. I'm not going to be touring 236 days, a year, playing Poughkeepsie, Idaho, and Helena, Montana, and things like that. I'm going to stay kind of local, and I'm going to do my little short sets, and I'm not trying to be famous at it, but I enjoy it, and I'm going to do it some more. Yeah. I can't wait to get back on stage.
And for screenwriting, you do mostly that, right?
Yeah. That's my love.
And do you ever do, like, any film your own, like, comedy shorts?
No, because and it's funny.
You said your son does.
Yeah,
filming.
because my son is an aspiring cameraman. He graduated from Long Beach State, and
cool.
There are some projects that I
Go Beach, me too.
Right,
yeah.
49ers. Well, did they change the name yet?
So I just had that going. No, so I think they're keeping 49ers. They just changed the mascot.
Oh, okay. It's not that Yosemite Sam looking dude anymore.
No. I guess, like, there was like a
minor looking
race. It was a race thing.
Why was he a race thing?
Because, like, the 49ers, I guess, like, that was during a time of a lot of intolerance and something about, like, when the miners came west. It was a big thing.
Well, I mean, it was pre-Civil War, so yeah, there was some intolerance.
Yeah, so I
mean, they got that whole slavery thing and the whole Indian Wars.
That kind of all happened. Yeah, that kind of all happened the same time with, like, the statue argument. That's that was happening. The General Lee, right? When they were taking down the statue, it was like that month period where all the media wanted us to focus on was, like, statues.
Okay, let me tell you how I feel about that in my little corner of black world. I don't have a problem with the statues and such being up. I use them as teachable moments.
Yeah,
I can look at this and go, look, this is nothing to celebrate.
We shouldn't pay for it from tax dollars. Right?
There, and I always ask people who, like, are very, like, Confederate flag happy and things like that.
Yeah.
I always go, y'all lost, right? So what do you celebrate? Are you celebrating the loss, the treason, or the slavery? Because those were the three major reasons to wave a Confederate flag. I don't think Confederate flags should fly from government buildings and things like that. But the Confederate flag itself doesn't. I catch a lot of hell from black people when I say this. It doesn't bother me as much as it should. What I don't like is how people are using it, because I mean, like, in Michigan recently, they had the COVID protest, and you get big fat white guys with ARs strapped to their guts, and they're waving Confederate flags to protest, wearing a mask outside.
Right.
Come on.
Yeah. It's almost just too much.
Yeah, they prostitute the Confederate flag. To me, okay, if you want to honor a heritage of losing a war and treason, okay, knock yourself out.
So I think there's a couple things there. It's like you can acknowledge a history without celebrating the the meaning or perverting the meaning to mean whatever the hell you want it to mean.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there a place for those things? Yeah. We should not start burning books. We should not start burning or knocking things down. But there's a place for them. Like, you know, there's museums. There's cultural sites. There's, you know, history. That's one of the biggest problems I think we have. Not the biggest, but it's a problem we have here. Is that the second a building starts to crack, we break it down. We build up a shiny new one made of all glass.
And it wouldn't have any history.
And no history. But, you know, when I spent a little bit of time in like Eastern Europe, the walls are all tattered, you know, with shells from Hungarian Revolution, and roads are beat up from tanks going down the streets, and it's a constant reminder of like the freedoms and the responsibilities and what can happen, you know, when things get weird. So it's very incumbent upon people to steer the ship and be engaged, but we don't have that.
No, well,
we start over. We press the reset button.
Here's the problem. Our country has way too much self-esteem and way too much ignorance. And ignorance and arrogance is a volatile combination. In Germany, and I've been to Germany a bunch of times. I worked for BMW for years, so I get to go to Germany quite a bit. They acknowledge their Nazi past. They don't celebrate it. Right. You know, it's against the law to wave a Nazi flag. Right. So the racists in Germany, they wave Confederate flags.
Really?
Yeah, they wave Confederate. That's their symbol. Yeah. But they still have, you know, buildings and monuments. You can still go to Dachau and see you can go to, you know, you can go to a concentration camp and they will educate you on what happened there. Right. But they don't have Holocaust reenactments. You know, we reenact the Civil War with a degree of pride on the other side, and that's the problem. That's the difference. If you want to, I'm not a fan of removing history because it happened, but let's not celebrate, you know, that part of the history because it was very oppressive.
Yeah. I think for how much energy goes into that, there's other things that could be celebrated a lot more. Yeah. So it does become a statement, right? It's not. I always look at that. It's not the action. It's like what message are you relaying here? Sure. And I think it's okay to have like if somebody feels a certain way and they have pride in a certain thing, like I'm very much that's their experience. I think that there's universal rights and wrongs, but you know, way under that, there's just my experience. And if what you're doing isn't hurting anybody else, then go do you. But there is an element of like when our government that we pay for, our government, directs funds to restore and encourage certain behaviors. That's where I have a problem with it. But that's just like the kind of fiscally conservative mind I have like there's a lot of things we could spend money on, so let's do that instead.
See, you know, my son and I were talking about this the other day. Nelly, remember the rapper Nelly?
Yeah. I hope he's feeling better. He always had that Band-Aid.
Right? Yeah, he had staph.
I hope he's feeling better now.
But Nelly, when he first came out, he was, you know, the big proponent of
right?
No, that's
Cisco.
That was Cisco. Yeah.
Oh, don't say it. Don't say it.
It's too easy.
Don't you say
I'll
it.
pass it the easy one.
Don't say
it. But Nelly used to tie up, you know, remember how people were doing the bandana around the knee thing?
Yeah.
I think Chachi was the first one to do it. But he did a Confederate flag around his knee. And I remember when that happened, I was thinking, okay, cool. This is going to be someone taking that symbol and making it mean something else, you know? Yeah. Which I was all for. But the problem is too many people use it to intimidate. You know, if you got people in Michigan storming the state capitol, you know, to protest COVID, and they're waving a Confederate flag, okay, Michigan's pretty much the north. It's about as north as you can get. Yeah. You know, if you're waving a Confederate flag, and then they had like a state congressman or something, or state representative, that to protest wearing a mask, he wore a Confederate flag.
Really?
Yeah, mask into the thing. And you're going, okay.
Are you even allowed to do that in a state building?
You know, apparently you can.
I don't think you're allowed to wave a...
Well, everyone always, you know, hides behind freedom of speech when they do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and well, I mean, but rules are rules. Like in a federal building, I don't think you...
Well, I thought rules were rules until I saw people storming the Capitol armed, you know, to protest COVID restrictions. So
Yeah.
rules are not rules for everybody. I've known, that this, in this country, rules apply to certain people. They don't apply to everybody.
Yeah.
And um, my problem is with the way, the Confederate flag was really kind of a dead symbol. Then in the 40s and 50s, people who were segregationists start to wave it again.
Yeah.
Because it was just a battle flag, and it didn't have that much significance. But they started waving it again in the 40s and 50s, and they used it specifically to intimidate those that were fighting against segregation. So if you really know the history of the flag and you know how it's used, you wouldn't be proud to wave it. But we romanticize it. In country music, you'll see bands and they have it waving behind them on the Diamond Vision or what? Well, I'm aging myself. Whatever the screen is, the multimedia presentation they have going. It's a romanticized symbol. It's really a suck symbol. It really is.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be something that people would be proud of if they really knew the heritage.
Yeah.
For me growing up, I remember it being on the General Lee on that beautiful Dodge they used to jump. On Dukes of Hazzard.
Right.
And I always thought it was a pretty flag, aesthetically.
Yeah.
But when I started to see, I remember I saw a picture in the 60s when blacks were trying to get the right to vote. And this black man who was probably about my age now, he's like in his mid-50s. And two younger, like 30-year-old white guys were trying to hold him. He had on a suit and a hat, tie, the whole thing. He was standing in line to get voters' rights. And he was trying to get free from them. And another guy had a Confederate flag on a flagpole with an eagle on the end of it. And they were about to stab him with it. And I thought, wow, if you use a flag as a weapon, that's when I first started to kind of not like the Confederate flag. And this is like early 70s.
So what flag was before the Confederate flag?
There was a simple
The circle. No, that was after.
Yeah, that was the Confederate flag was like this simple white with like a red cross thing on it. It wasn't a big deal. And
But,
then they had
what flag did we have before?
Well, the Union always had flags just with the 13 bars, the 13 stripes, and then it was just a number of how many stars it was, with how many states we had. So the Union,
right.
the Union just had a
So, but did the Confederate flag come out of?
Yeah, when they seceded from the Union, in
that's when they made that flag.
They made their own flag, got their own president, got their own capital.
There's stars on there, right?
Yeah, there's stars in there.
How many stars are on there?
However many Confederate states,
like 13 or something.
Yeah, I think it was like that. Yeah. However many Confederate states there were, they put a star for each one.
Yeah.
And I think the design is cool. It looks a lot, like the Union Jack from England is a pretty flag to me.
Yeah.
And the Confederate flag, when I first saw it, that's a pretty flag.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until much, much, much later that I learned the actual history of it. Yeah. And when you read the history of it, oh man, the guy that designed it, I mean, he says in the language, it's the white man's flag, and it's designed to do this and that. I was like, whoa. Yeah. This is deep. And if everybody knew that, if you saw the hate behind it, no one would wave it proudly. Mm-hmm. But
And I think that, honestly, a lot of my philosophy when it comes to like those types of things are, I think ignorance is a big problem. Mm-hmm. But it's not a problem we're going to solve anytime soon. No. So a lot of times, like, it's not that I give people a pass. Like, if they're doing an action that is creating harm, no pass. No pass. That's where ignorance, you being dumb in your basement compared to you being dumb on the road, different things. I'm fine with you being dumb in your basement. I don't want you on the road next to me. Yeah. But I usually chop things up to humans being humans because a lot of times, especially people that are raised in parts of the country where they're so influenced by toxic philosophy from authority figures, whether it's family members or school teachers or something, they soak this up and it becomes their truth and their reality. And I think that they could still be a good person but be running a really bad operating system. And
that's a good way to look at it.
And I just feel like I don't hate the person for having a view that I think is wrong. I feel bad for them, and I want them to stay in their basement.
Yeah.
And if they're if they do come on the road with that and it's a harm, then I'm much more likely to have an opinion on got to shut that down.
Yeah.
But typically, I'm just like, man, humans are like I'm a and this is I'm not an intelligent individual.
Yeah, you are.
I observe and I'm very interested I'm very interested in people. I'm interested in why people think the way they think, and like how it developed. Like, how do you develop into a person? Like with these philosophies. But I mean, I have a degree, bachelor's in political science. Learn nothing. Learn nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like I read a few books. I feel like I have a feel, but you know that feeling when you meet somebody who's like, you were talking about like Alonzo Bowden, like you meet somebody who's like rattling off data and like, like I have a good friend, Nate, like he's very, like he's a lawyer. He researches things. He knows all the data and like the information. There's a lot of those people in the world. I'm not one of them. No, I'm just not, like, I can't, like, I don't process things that way. But I feel like there's a lot of people that it's not going to be their strong suit for to like really comprehend things. And I kind of give them a little bit of a pass and just, like, your ignorance, has to, stop with you.
Well, here's the difference. We used to have enough decency that if we were ignorant, we would keep our ignorance to ourselves.
Right.
But we have been given avenues with
there's
social
no public
media.
shame. I've always said shame is a good thing.
It is, absolutely is.
Shame is a tool that a community uses in a positive way to help people, be able to express the best parts of themselves.
Sure. But this is the problem with, like, PC got kind of overrun in the 90s with that, where... it's one thing to be decent and not say stupid things. There's another thing to where someone can make you lose your job if you said something that would ordinarily be a normal thing to say, and now you can't say it. But by the same token, with the combination of social media, and in my opinion, when Obama became president, we became a lot more polarized as a country, and I disagree with people on why we became polarized. I think a lot of people were just very uncomfortable with a black man holding that position.
I 100% agree.
And when his turn was over, and he did just 2 terms, I knew we were going to see a backlash. I didn't know it was going to be as radical a backlash as it became, because now we have someone who is not a diplomat. Where politicians, and let's face it, politicians all lie. Politicians all make mistakes. But generally speaking, they tried to be diplomatic in that they wouldn't try to say things that would intentionally, turn people against each other, or they wouldn't try to drive a wedge in the divide necessarily.
Right.
Or they wouldn't say, irreverent or irrepressible things. They would kind of mind their words. Right. And if they misspoke, they would try to cover for it, or they would apologize for it. And now we have a guy who doesn't apologize for anything, and he doubles down on a lot of stuff that he says. So the people that would ordinarily have an ignorant opinion that they would keep to themselves out of a sense of decency and shame now feel vindicated and validated. I went on a motorcycle trip, ironic with Alonzo Bowden. We went on a motorcycle trip for BMW to promote this new touring bike, and we were driving from Kansas City, Missouri, to South Dakota for the big Harley event up there, Sturgis. And you drive through northern Missouri and Iowa and places like that. Well, I engage people, like I'm sure you do. I engage people at every opportunity.
Yes.
And I'm never in Iowa that much. Right. So if I could talk to someone at truck stops, I couldn't wait to do it.
Yeah.
And the disturbing thing that I found was you'd be talking to like this out-of-work mechanic who's been on government assistance for 12 years. And he said he was going to vote for Trump because he talks like I talk.
Yeah.
And my response was always, well, don't you want someone that's better than you? In that office,
but that's what happened, and the thing that was being addressed with Trump being elected was Barack was too good. He was too good. He spoke so well that, have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Yeah,
love that movie. I watched it the other day. So you know how he's like talking and like no one understands him because it's just like. That's how a lot of the country felt.
Yeah.
Like I didn't, but I remember like watching him going like, most people are seeing him. They're not relating to this. He's so darn good at speaking, and then also like it was almost like even if he was dishonest, he was such a good speaker that it would almost become it didn't even matter because he could not, I don't want to say cover up, but he could move past it so eloquently that you didn't feel like, wait, no, you like there were bombs and people died. Like,
I always thought that a good debater can win an argument even if he's wrong.
Right.
And he's a phenomenal orator. One of the best I've seen in that office since like Kennedy and Reagan was a very effective one as well. But where Barack Obama ran into trouble with the country, especially a country that didn't want to like him anyway, the part of the country that didn't want to like him anyway. Remember when the Trayvon Martin thing happened, and he said something that I thought he was trying to relate to.
Yeah, I remember.
He said, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon Martin.
Right.
And I heard people in Missouri say, see, he's picking sides. It's like, no. He's trying to make this thing relatable. He's trying to show you that, listen, you know me, I'm not a thug, I'm not a criminal. You see my daughters, I don't raise, delinquent kids.
Right.
If I had a kid, he would look just like this kid. And all that kid was doing was, going to his dad's house from the liquor store, from the AM/PM or wherever.
So you know what's crazy about the trade, whenever any of these things happen, right? And I know it's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
Is I'm very much one to say like wait till the facts come out, and then because I think that the court of public opinion is not a good place to try people.
I agree.
And as comedians specifically, or more regularly, like they fall victim to this thing of like, the facts aren't out, but I've already lost everything, and especially when these things happen, oftentimes there's more to the story, and with like these clips of like videos that happen, and then it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. It's like, and then more information comes out, but you've already like laid it out. You've already like sent the executioner and made this judgment, and it's bad. So typically 90% of the time, I try not to like, okay, it looks bad, but I'm gonna, let's see what happens, because over the next week there's gonna be a lot of like things that come out, and there's been a couple times where I've been like, well, that's why I don't make judgments, because like now there's like more information, and it's at least a little nuance to where like this might just be a very unfortunate thing, and then there's sometimes where, so this last one was one of the one of the times where I saw it and go, I don't need any more information. I'm pissed off. Like this is I don't
in Minneapolis you're talking about.
Yeah. Floyd.
You know what? I'm getting to the point where I almost don't want to know their names, because they're starting to feel like family members.
Yeah.
There's so many, and I can relate to so many of their stories. Yeah. I'm almost trying to not learn the names. I say that gentleman in Minnesota is what I've been saying.
Okay.
But his name is George something, but yeah, it hit, George Floyd. Yeah, so. And it starts to hit too close to home, and they really start to feel like family members too.
Right. But that, for me, and there was multiple things about that one that bothered me. Number one, because the amount of time it took for it to happen. Sometimes, again, I kind of chop things up to humans being humans, and sometimes I don't think it is a white and black thing. Sometimes I think it is a reaction thing. Sometimes I think there's more to the story. Sometimes I think that there's a bad decision was made in the heat of a moment. Sometimes that I believe that is the case. Sometimes I feel like you could be the nicest freaking guy in the world, not a racist bone in your body, and then you react a certain way, and then now all of a sudden you're the most hated person in the world. That wasn't the case the other day. What I saw there with the body language of the cop, the technique, I saw somebody who wanted control, wanted power, and was almost more aggressive in spite of people telling him to stop. And coming from a jiu-jitsu background, Like I kind of have a good feeling of how it feels to have your airway cut off,
Compromised, yeah.
And it's just a very sad thing that they that happened, and I think that on one hand there's a very strong that's one of the ones where it really brings to light things that we need to work on together.
Yeah. Well, here's my take on that one. 9 minutes, is a very, very long time to have your airway compromised.
Yep.
And, you have somebody literally begging for his life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it got to the point to where you could tell he was semi-coherent because he was asking for his mother.
I don't think it was his airway, right?
Well,
that was that was more of a blood thing.
Yeah.
That's much more dangerous too.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But when a grown man, especially a grown healthy man,
mm-hmm.
is reduced to asking for his mama.
Yeah.
He's not of his self at that point.
Right.
He has reached he's as desperate as he can to just cling to life.
Yeah.
And I think that officer took a degree of satisfaction in being in that power position.
You could see it in his face.
You see it in his face.
Yep.
And like you said, in defiance of the crowd at one point was pleading him, we'll just put him in the car. You don't have to do that,
Yeah.
And you can see he was doing it almost to spite them.
Mm-hmm.
I have been...
Especially when he was out. Especially when he was
unconscious.
Yeah.
And he was handcuffed. And here's the thing. Once you're handcuffed, you put the person in the back of the car. I mean, I think that's the way most police departments are trained. If he's subdued, you put him in the car. If he's still banging his head against the window like you see meth heads and stuff doing, okay, then you can do that shackle thing with the ankles and almost like hog tie them and you lay them in the back of the car. Right. But at some point you put them in the car. There's no way anyone can justify putting a knee behind the neck of anyone.
So obviously there's a huge it brings to light a huge racial problem.
Yeah, for good reason.
Yeah. But do you also feel that it brings to light a huge? I've said this for a while, and you're a firefighter, right?
Yeah,
so yeah. Most police officers will go through a ton of training for firearm safety, and never discharge their gun in on duty.
Yeah.
But I think every firefighter or every police officer at some point will have to subdue somebody or grapple.
Yeah.
Why is it not mandatory to do jiu-jitsu as a... Because and again, if there was an intention, then that's one thing. And this doesn't solve that problem. But for most, like anybody, I'd say blue belt and up knows when someone's out, they're out. They're not a danger anymore.
Yeah.
And you can't hold on.
Well, the other thing too, and you and I know some, jiu-jitsu trained police officers, some really good ones. And we know some that are aspiring police officers. And when I was a kid, because all black parents have to tell their male children in particular, they have to have the talk and they have to repeat the talk. And it's literally called the talk.
Right. And
it's how to deal with police because they know you're going to face situations where you're going to be wrongly accused and you're going to be unnecessarily harassed. Right. And in some cases, beaten up or roughed up.
Right.
So they give you this talk on how to deal with police and how to hopefully diffuse the situation as much as possible. But invariably, if you're a black male, society is taught to fear us. We're 12% of the population, but we get arrested at 6 times, and convicted 6 times higher
than 12?
Yeah, we're 12%, like 12.8% of the population.
Of nation?
Yeah. Really? Yeah. Black folks are like 12.8%, something like that. Okay. But we get arrested, convicted, and incarcerated at a rate 6 times higher than our counterparts. And part of the reason is, for lack of a better term, society wants us off the streets. They want us removed from the chessboard. So I have been on juries where there's a black assailant or black defendant, and in the jury room, someone says, "Well, he must have done something at some point," and you're like, "Wow!" So because you can't prove that he did something wrong now, you're willing to send him to jail because you think that he must have the possibility of having done something before. I have been Trayvon Martin several times, where I'm in a neighborhood where someone doesn't expect to see me. and a civilian or two will follow me in their car. I had a situation. I went to Cerritos High, and Cerritos Regional Park. I don't know if you know it. Is a huge park off of like Bloomfield.
Oh yeah, like the sports.
Yeah, they have a
like
sports complex. They had tennis
like
courts. Well, back then they had basketball courts and tennis courts, and I played both those sports.
Yeah.
Well, I had been playing basketball all day, and I was going to go play tennis. So I was waiting on tennis courts, and I saw a classmate who lived in the area. So I I'm chatting her up, and I said, well, here, it's no need for you to walk home. I'll take you home. And she was like, well, my father doesn't want me riding in a car with someone that he's never met. And I went, sound strategy. My dad would be the same way.
Yeah.
I said, well, it's getting dark. I don't want you walking. I'll walk you home. Also a chance for me to shoot my shot.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did. I walked her home. She lived in a beautiful gated community. Walked her to her gates, and then coming back up Shoemaker. Shoemaker is a street that, in that area, was just you were on the outside of the gated community, so just a wall. And then there's another neighborhood across the street. So I'm walking in the grass, the long walk going back to Regional Park.
Right.
And I'm a student at Cerritos High, but two guys, grown men, in a car, saw me and go, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, just going back to my car, right? They go back and they make a block, and then they're, shouting things at me, calling me names and things. I'm thinking, okay, grown man, I'm like 15 and a half.
Right.
This could not go well. Let me get back to my car as fast as I can. So what are you going to do? You run. They chase. I get to the park, and I have, an advantage because they're in a car. I can go into the park, but I get to my car,
right.
And I think I'm safe. When I get to my car, now the police come, and they come in droves, like 4 cars,
right.
And they're ready for business. I'm 120 pounds, maybe, and they roughed me up. In the process of trying to find out what I was doing. I'm like, I'm wearing Izod Lacoste tennis gear. Why were you running? Because 2 grown white men were chasing me in a car like vigilantes in the South,
Yeah.
When I tried to report the situation, it's always going to be, back then there was no cell phones and no witnesses. So it was my word against the 2 people who reported it and the 4 white police officers that...
But what was the crime? Did they?
There was no crime. There was
Right.
no crime. It was a black guy in
what
an
is-
area where they didn't expect to see black guys.
So just suspicious.
So
activity.
they said suspicious activity. The same thing that Trayvon Martin got called in on when George Zimmerman,
Yeah.
with his what was he, neighborhood watch or whatever, carrying a gun, says that this black guy is in the neighborhood. He's wearing a hoodie. They're always up to something, is what he was kind of what he was conveying. So he took it upon himself to chase this kid down. When he finally confronted the kid, he found himself in a situation where the kid was going to defend himself, and then he ends up shooting the kid, and he still walks the streets. And he's got a rampant history of violence to women and other people. He's just a jerk. But, I have stories that go back, from relatives to the 30s and 40s that are similar, where mobs of vigilantes are coming to kill this person, and they're going to get away with it.
Now, do you think things have gotten better?
I think that there are things in place that should make them better, but no. I don't. I think overall, we don't have lynching is illegal. So
Right.
it's better in that standpoint.
Like even if so, I mean, obviously that's a one thing, and it could be ignorance or it could be optimism.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times when the conversation starts coming up of like the racial divide and how when people start saying like we're further apart than we ever have been, I only know my experience, and I know that's not my experience, right? I grew up in Section 8 housing. I was the only white. We were the only white family in Pomona in this little. It was pretty tough. Saw some stuff. Saw murder. Saw one guy gave me a gun to hold on for. It was a rough upbringing.
Gotcha.
Okay, and I just feel like my experience isn't the normal experience that a lot of people see. but when I think of like the last, I don't know, 80 years,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think that we're making some progress over time. And again, it might be ignorance, it might be optimism, but I feel like with every generation that goes on, the ignorance that comes from a certain time, that fades, that as that fades, things get better over time. And I'm not saying that that's a reason to just wait for change.
Mm-hmm.
But when the argument comes up that like it's worse now than ever, I feel like it's a little hyperbolic, right?
Well, here's the reason. Now we have checks and balances in place that if you come in your job interview and they ask you, have you had any white supremacist or white nationalist ties, that might actually preclude you from getting your job. Right. So that's progress. In the old days, that was a requirement.
Right, yeah.
In L.A., they used to recruit ex-military Southern white men to come out to L.A. to be police officers to deal with our race problem, our race issue in the 50s and 60s. So you had police officers that came out here specifically to beat up Mexicans and blacks.
What do you think
So we're better from that standpoint, yeah.
Right. And I think that like there's progress to be made. I think culturally, I think a lot of what we talk about is cultural. Mm-hmm. Like when somebody, I think there's a lot more whites listening to what would be considered culturally African American music.
Sure.
I think there's a lot. I think culturally there is more progress to be made. Now I think a lot of what happens from a authority level, I think it has to do with representation. It has to do with the communities that are being served by certain populations. Mm-hmm. I think that there's things that could probably be put in place that would help. Mm-hmm. But when I think of what are some solutions? Because I mean, we're not talking about like an apology, right? We're not talking about like making amends that way. There's the problem on a big level, right?
Yeah.
But like, what can we do today to help build the trust inside communities to where people feel safer and they feel more comfortable to break away from experiences that like you've had growing up, that a lot of people have today? Like, what are things that we could do?
In a couple of things that we've talked about tonight. Getting back to the point to where people are ashamed to be ignorant.
Yeah.
We aren't at that point right now. Right now, we celebrate ignorance. Yeah. We have ignorance in very high places in political power and media and things like that get to espouse their particular brand of ignorance, and they get praised for it. So people think, yeah, see, that guy thinks like me, and they're misinformed, and that happens on both sides of the aisle. But one side is, I think, more hate-based from a defensive standpoint, that they don't want to lose what they perceive they have. And I think that we've got to get back to making that kind of behavior shameful enough to where you don't want to express it openly, because it shouldn't be expressed openly.
What's crazy is my observation on the political side is that it's almost embarrassing the amount of like I don't know the word, but like trying to appeal to the black community from a place of just wanting the votes and not really wanting to address issues. That's where
Democrats pander to black communities, have been doing that for years. Yeah, Democrats have been pandering.
But there's no incentive for Republicans to not do the same thing. I always lean on the side of more progress will be made by not making it about identity and making it about individual freedoms, right? Yeah. So that's like that kind of middle right argument. But the thing I think that turns a lot of people off from, like, say, the left is like Biden's most recent gaffe is a great example of like listen, like, people don't want to be like his gaffe is just a symbol of like what it means to basically say, oh, you're black, you have to be a Democrat. And if you are a Republican, well then you're not valid as a person. And it sucks because you could have whatever freaking opinions and views you want, and like the color of your skin or anything, where you're from, should not be dictate which party you are in. But
I agree.
but I know there's a lot of people that are lot of like black Republicans that get shamed for being Republican.
Yeah. Here's why.
And there's a lot of like when it comes to like when we were talking about like shame, like one of the things that people that are kind of like the shame for being white is a issue that people become very defensive about, and I'm guilty of that from time to time, where I almost want to take like this other position because I'm not, but painting out all whites to be a certain way because of this issue. You can acknowledge the issue, work towards progress, and not feel like you're a piece of crap.
Yeah, and I hear you. My answer to that is usually being falsely accused of racism is not nearly as bad as being a victim of racism. You know, so it's, I hear you, but it's like when I'm in that conversation a lot. It's like I walk in with a shotgun wound to my shoulder, and I'm like, oh man, I need help, and then somebody comes next to me and goes, yeah, I need help just as much. I have a paper cut, you know, and it's shotgun wound to paper cut to me comparatively, and I'm a victim of my own personal experience in that regard because that issue affects me more in that way. So I get why, you know, well-meaning, very balanced, good-hearted white people hate being grouped in that group. But it's not as bad as being black and being grouped in that group of, you're a criminal, you're to be feared, I need to put my foot on your neck for 9 minutes to, you know.
Right.
So,
but it's not a matter of like it being as bad. I think it's a matter of like it being effective. Like it's not effective. So like with like that example, it'd be more like, you know, somebody there's a whole, you know, a whole crowd of people and one person shoots but now the whole crowd is guilty of murder. It's like, well, no, I think like building trust and building on the conversation and letting more people in the conversation to educate but once you put up you're guilty, now I'm going to educate you, I think that creates an extra barrier, right?
I agree.
And again, I don't freaking know, I don't know shit,
Yeah.
but just like the feeling that I get is that when it's coming from a place of like you're wrong and you have to like you need to be re-educated on this, it slows down the effectiveness of just having the conversation from there is a problem and we have to work together to fix it.
Yeah, and I hear you. I think part of the problem from the black side in dealing in having effective conversation about that is it's a very emotional issue for us because we can all touch to a personal experience. You know, I remember when I was a kid, a guy in my neighborhood, you know, was wrongly shot up, you know, mistaken identity. And was shot up by police. I mean, like 40 something times, and 40 shots into the car. I remember my father, who was very well-to-do, upstanding member of the community, manager of the local car dealership, and him getting rousted by police on his way home, and his biggest concern being he didn't want like his kids to see him in that defenseless a position because he was trying to comply and they were being, unnecessarily harsh. For me, growing up as and having a lot of friends in the South Bay, and having to drive through Torrance and El Segundo and PV where they had LA County sheriffs, and being pulled over so regularly and pulled out of the car and laid on the ground, and you're going to visit friends, and so the neighbors of those friends see you harassed by the police all the time, and they think, because they don't, their kids don't go through that,
right.
So they think, okay, he must be doing something. So now you have to deal with that perception as well. I mean, it almost validates the fears they already have for you, and none of it is warranted. My son, and if you've ever met my son, you know he's like the most polite, most well-meaning, well-mannered kid you'd ever meet. I mean, ever meet. He was cutting weight from when he was wrestling at Cerritos College. And in our nice neighborhood, in Long Beach, on the east side by El Dorado Park, he was jogging and someone called and said, black guy running, he must have done something.
Right. Okay.
And they sent 3 police cars and a helicopter from a 135-pound wrestler's son.
Yeah.
That very easily could have gone way wrong. You got 3 different people. I've been in that situation a million times. 3 different police officers yelling directions at you. One saying, put your hands down, put your hands up, put your hands on your head. And if you sneeze,
right,
they see that as, he was going for something. He was going for a weapon. I've been in situations where, I've had Torrance PD slam me against my own car, put a gun literally to my ear and tell me I look nervous.
Yeah.
Or I've had El Segundo and Signal Hill PD slam me again on my own car, throw me on the ground, whatever, raise their club while I'm sitting there cooperating and say, stop resisting, which code to me so that they're letting passersby or anybody come by know that, hey, I'm going to hit this kid because he's resisting. Yeah. I'm not resisting, and I have to sit there and wait for the blow because I know it's coming. That kind of stuff, we have that history.
Yeah.
So it's hard to have a rational conversation with people who have never experienced any of that stuff, knowing that not only are we still going through it, but everybody that we know, every male that we know and love, young and old, could still be facing that danger. It's hard to not get emotional and have conversations. And then people get kind of flippant about it. Well, you must have been doing something. I've never been pulled over when I wasn't doing something. Well, you don't look like me. Now, we talked about our backgrounds. You came up from a much rougher background than me. I grew up in Compton. But if we were both walking to an elevator, who are the women going to grab their purse around, me or you?
Around you.
Yeah, and you are much more likely to steal from them than I am. People handed you a gun when you were a kid.
Yeah.
But being black, and especially being a black man, is exhausting, dude. I mean,
bet.
Even just coming here today, the gate was open. You have a gated community, beautiful community.
Yeah. I
came in because the gate was open. When I parked, I could see the eyes.
Oh, for sure.
Of people going, I don't know who he is, but he doesn't belong here.
I've moved on my position of white privilege. Not to say like I ever was no, there's no such thing. Mm-hmm. But I've and partially to your credit. Oh. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of the back and forth, it's not lost on me. Mm-hmm. Even if I disagree on some aspects, and there's a contrarian in me that wants to kind of poke holes. Sure. This. But there is it's all about awareness, right? Mm-hmm. So when you really start looking for it and you really start seeing there's no doubt in my mind that there's a different level of exertion that comes from me doing my daily stuff than there is somebody who is of color. Yeah. And I think that again, I think there's an ignorance to it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's and I think there's a deterrent for white people to want to look at that, mm-hmm. because when there's a line, I think, from being semi-aware, mm-hmm. And compassionate and having the willingness to concede certain preconceived notions in mm-hmm. order to make room for not only compromise, mm-hmm. but deferment in, mm-hmm. in a little bit of a way. Yeah. There's a difference between that and then the apologeticism. Is that a word?
Let's go with it. Let's go with it.
Yeah. So it's a lot of syllables. But and that's there is that
you are blacker than me. You're making up words.
I
apologize.
I apologize. but because and again, this is me making it about me. But when people talk about the typical white experience or two, I'm like, there's no. I don't know if there is a typical, because I was beat up because of the color of my skin. My entire childhood. Until I was 15, I was just beat up because I'm white. Brad, they just call me Whitey and they beat the crap out of me, and I just remember feeling oh, this doesn't seem fair at all. Mm-hmm. But again, that's a paper cut because I didn't, when the cops show up, I'm good. But then it was the roles would flip. Yeah. But again, it's like paper cut to shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember feeling like this is wrong. Like to be completely judged and just like the color of my skin is wrong. And I lived in like a very gated, like it was like its own little world.
Yeah.
Like Section 8 has like, we rarely left. And like, that was just what it was.
Yeah.
But I think that there is a level of like people with progress, and just speaking for myself, moving from like, white privilege, from what like I thought it meant to where I know it is now. And I think that is like what happened the other day is a perfect example of that. I don't think that would have been the same situation if it was anybody else.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. Yes, there's a component of like police training, I think, is just coming from a jiu-jitsu mind. I think there's that, and there's little things we could do for progress that might mitigate some of the bad results that come from this. But it's a huge problem. And I think that what you do when you speak on it, I think it resonates. And speaking for myself, it's helped me move my opinion to being much more aware. And again, it's kind of like the fight against ignorance, right?
Well, ignorance isn't a bad word. I use it a lot. I use it to
it
describe
too
myself.
much. I get in trouble because
Yeah.
I'll tell somebody, I'm like, oh, that's an ignorant thing to say.
Yeah.
Or like, because I use it the way it's supposed to, where it just means like you don't know.
You don't know. That's all it means.
And if I tell somebody like, oh, you're ignorant to the facts, they go,
like, who you calling ignorant?
Yeah, who you calling ignorant?
Yeah.
Like, it gets bad.
Yeah, and ignorance, I always say ignorance is curable. Stupidity is terminal.
Yeah.
Because ignorance just means
I've
you
been
don't know.
accused of both. But,
and I've been both.
Yeah.
But ignorance is a choice you can cure. It just means you don't know. Once you gather the information or someone shares the information with you, you're no longer ignorant. Now, if you choose to continue...
Well, it depends how much is in the way, right, of like from ignorance to enlightenment. Like, how much have you been... Because I have family in certain parts of the country that it would take a lot of information, and probably all the information in the world probably wouldn't cure some of their thoughts. But it's life experience.
Well, you got to be open to hearing it. I mean, that's the problem. But then
trusting it.
Well, that's going back to you're making the choice, even though you've been given the information, and that's what I mean. That's where stupidity is terminal, because you've been given the information, so you're no longer ignorant, but you choose the wrong answer anyway.
Right.
Okay, well, I can't help you.
But it's trusting the information. I think that's a huge problem, and you touched on it. Great example, or maybe a terrible one, but I was shopping at Ralph's grocery store. Not a guy named Ralph. That'd be weird. But I was going through the meat, and like I remember like all these like news stories of like the meat quality being like be careful, like meat quality, all these things, and like I was just like getting steaks and I'm like, why is it that when I see a news story, I almost go like, oh, like what's the political? Oh, they're doing that to bash Trump because he went to the meat factory. Like it's like almost I don't trust it at all. But really, I just saw on the news that they were like, dude, hey, meat quality, it's going to be really bad. It's not going to be good for you. Like they're cutting regulations, which who knows what that means. Yeah. And here I am it's like the information comes at us so fast that it's almost like it has to come from a trusted source. And I don't think that the media today is a trusted source to go like, oh, this is just pure information for me to help me. It's like there's always this stuff. Yeah,
we don't have neutral sources like we used to. When I was a kid, the news was basically the news. It was 5 W's and an H. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. Yeah.
And it was 45 minutes. Yeah. Which is plenty.
Yeah. Now you can get the news you want. You can get the news that best suits
you literally look for the answer, and then somebody makes a story.
It's in the algorithm. Yeah. They know what you choose and like, and they know how you speak. So they send you the information that they know will feed your ignorance or your side of view.
Well, they know what you'll click on.
Yeah. Well, here and this leads me to what we almost talked about a second ago, about messaging and the Democrats particularly pandering to blacks and so on and so forth. Ironically, there would be more black Republicans if Republicans' messaging wasn't so screwed up. The black culture is pretty Baptist church based.
Right.
We're pretty evangelical. We're not really crazy pro-abortion and things like that.
I've always thought that, and I know you're talking about it right now, but I'd never understood the appeal the other way.
Well, it's because the way Republicans talk to us. You know,
Yeah.
even Trump in this thing, his pitch to Black Americans was, "Hey, what do you got to lose? You're so screwed up in everything else you do. Literally, what do you got to lose? Your unemployment is this, your this is that, your education is this," and never take into consideration all the factors that would cause us to be in those situations, particularly in the big urban areas. But that was his message. What do you got to lose? You know,
Yeah.
and so you're almost, as a Black person, you're almost like, nah, there's no way I could vote for you. There's no way I could side with you when you do that. And then you have like the Charlottesville thing where, you know, you have literally people in khakis saying, chanting, Nazi stuff and Nazi flags and Confederate this and hate that, and guy runs over people and all this stuff. And then you look into your president for leadership and he says, well, there are good people on both sides. Here's the thing. Whether that's true or not, that's not the messaging as a Black person or a Jewish person you want to hear at that point. You don't want to hear someone say that there was a possibility that the people that hate you, that don't mind you dying, are probably, they're okay too. I also have a thing where if the Klan supports you, it's probably not a good idea for me to vote for you wherever you are. I don't care if you're local, if you're running for dog catcher. If the Klan supports you, I probably shouldn't vote for you.
So I mean, I don't disagree with that, but with those things, when the clans, like, is it that unified where they, like, the Klan kind of like gathers and supports? I've always
they're a voting bloc.
I've always wondered this, like when you show like an endorsement of support, like, how do you shrug that off and like you could like disavow them, right? Like,
yeah, if you want to, but here's the thing: if you're smart like Trump is, you don't disavow them, because you lose that block. They'll vote independent; they just won't come out. So you dance around it, and you say something that kind of placates them, and then privately you go, hey, I can't be, but thanks for your support.
So do you think Trump has been bad for Black people?
That's too vague a statement.
Okay.
I think Trump has been bad for Black people in the sense that he has created a culture that validates ignorance and drives a wedge between Americans.
But do you think he's personally racist?
I played golf with Donald Trump.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this story.
No.
He is everything both sides say he is.
Okay.
He's everything both sides say he is. He's smart, clever, shrewd, calculating, a very good, sound business acumen.
Yeah.
He's all those things. He's also racially insensitive. He's a braggart. He's a liar. He's a cheat. He's all the things the other side say he is as well. When I played golf with him, he was a staunch Clinton Democrat.
Right.
And he had his course he was opening up in PV, and I knew one of the groundskeepers. So I got to play around that. He was bringing some businessmen on, and we just kind of joined our group.
Sweet.
And in the 3 or so hours that I got to spend with the man, I watched him lie, cheat, steal, make racist remarks.
It's like kicking the ball and stuff.
Oh gosh, yeah. He has an amazing foot wedge. That foot wedge is, whew.
Yeah.
He subtracts stats from his card, the whole nine. He was the course champion at his own course, that pros had played on.
Right.
But I also watched him mishandle a teenage employee, like a female teenage employee. So, he's a pig. He's a pig of the highest order. The guy's he's got multiple marriages. He's cheated on every wife he's ever had. He's fornicated with porn stars. I mean, you name anything.
But then you look at like JFK.
Sure.
So I mean, like,
I'm not saying he's unique, but it's hypocritical.
Do you think like, so he's supported by the Klan, but like, do you think he is like the racist that like he's made out to be?
I think he's an opportunist. I think George Wallace. I remember him, the governor of Alabama, back in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
He was considered like he was like the poster boy for racism.
Right.
The dirty little secret about George Wallace is he really was a moderate.
Yeah.
But he learned that the more he shouted segregation, 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 and inward, 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 he got more cheers, so that's
Right.
what he became.
It was like clickbait before it was clickbait.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he got more votes that way, and he kept his office. So then he became like the guy for segregation. He's going to stand in the door at Alabama University and
Yeah.
not let students in, and he had to be removed by federal troops and everything. So he became that
like-
guy.
yeah.
Trump is a lot like that, in my opinion. This is just my humble opinion.
Yeah.
He's an opportunist. I think this is going to sound, well, I don't care. I'm going to say it.
Say it.
I don't think there are too many white men his age that haven't had racist thoughts.
Right. But
He's got rental history
I agree with. Okay, but do you think that's
at the core of his being.
well, that too. That's a better question. You have better questions than I do. But what I was gonna say is that really isolated to white people? Because I've met a lot
Is
of
racism isolated to white people?
So like you said, like not a lot of white men that haven't had racist thoughts.
Yes.
Which I agree with.
Yeah.
I think that honestly, we are all products of how we are raised and
Yes.
and our inputs, right? Everything
Yes.
we've watched, everything that so like I think that's true. Like I think that it's the people that acknowledge those thoughts that can make things better. But you have to be able to acknowledge like these inputs and these programs that we run and these like these filters that we see the world through, and like the people that are aware of that make things better.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
So, but I mean, I've met a lot of racist black people. Actually, Asians. Honestly, sometimes they're the most like a Filipino and like somebody from another part of it. Like they like racism is everywhere.
Oh,
and I know that's
remember.
not. I know that's not what we're talking about, but.
But I'm with you.
Let's
go there.
I just agree with you that like, I think that it would be, just like every man has had a thought about a woman, at some point. I think that sometimes our thoughts are the starting point for to build a philosophy on it, or like a thought as a starting point. You can't help the thoughts that pop in your head, and they happen for so many different reasons. Sure. But it's like what we do with those thoughts and how we see those thoughts as valid or invalid or right or wrong.
Well, here's the thing:
forward.
we're tribal. I think people in general are tribal. I think a good test is if you're watching boxing late at night on TV and you don't know either fighter. One fighter is white and one fighter is black. Who do you root for? Generally speaking, you root for the one that looks like you if you don't know either one of them. For me,
or the one from your country.
I was going to say.
right?
I was going to say if one of them is from my country or like a neighboring
or
country.
if I see like
Canada,
a short, like stocky dude, I'm always rooting
somebody
for
you
that dude.
identify with. Yeah. Same with like Southpaws. I root for Southpaws for the same reason.
You put yourself in and yeah.
Yeah, but I think here's and this is just my opinion on this, but here's where I run into trouble with people on the whole racism thing. Can black people be racist?
We've had it out on this.
Yeah. My opinion is, this is one of the times you were wrong.
Was it? Just one of many. One of many.
Racism requires power to institute. You can have racially insensitive thoughts. You can be prejudiced. You can be all those things. Like when I was a kid, when I bought my first home in Compton, the kids in my neighborhood were surprised that I had white friends. And I'd bring a friend over for dinner, and the kids who had not had exposure to other cultures, would come up to me and go, "Is that your friend?" "Yeah, that's my friend." You guys came over to eat?" "Yeah, he's a great cook." "You eat his food?" "Yeah." "I thought white people don't season their food." I'm like, "No, he's a great cook. You seasoned your food."
Yeah.
But that was a thought that they had because, quite honestly, they hadn't had exposure to other cultures.
Right.
Racism to me is also a combination of fear and ignorance. If you fear something and you don't know about it and you don't want to know about it, you're more comfortable just kind of pulling yourself back, saying, "I hate that because it's different."
Right.
But real racism to me requires power. You have to have the power to institute the discrimination and segregation. You have to be able to oppress. So, like in your situation when you were a kid, I don't know what the ethnic makeup was of your housing. Was it primarily black, primarily brown?
It was pretty split.
Black and brown?
Yeah.
And then you?
Yeah.
Okay. So you caught hell from those two sides.
Yeah, there are times where like I, make friends on
Sure,
one side, and there was like a lot of like,
yeah.
they were fighting.
Well, there's black and brown fighting.
Yeah.
It's like two societies fighting for the bottom rung of the
Yeah.
ladder.
Yeah.
But if you were in, let's say you were in an all black environment,
Mm-hmm.
and you got bullied because you were white. Okay, well that group had the power to oppress you. So if you want to call that racism, I wouldn't argue with you. But the problem is societal racism is so big and so systemic and so institutional that it infects every aspect of human society to the point to where it doesn't matter how many degrees I acquire, it doesn't matter how much money I make, it doesn't matter where I live. At some point, someone is going to assume that I'm less than, or that I'm scary, and they have the power. Like all this Karen phenomena now. I can't tell you how many times I've had white women overreact to my presence.
Right.
And if they had a cell phone, they could have called the police and said, "This guy's he's harassing me." And they do.
Right.
They go into the fake hysteria and the whole nine because they know that they are going to be supported by the authorities. When I have to call the police on, like a few times I've had to call the police on a white assailant for doing something. When the police arrive, they talk to the assailant first. Even though I'm the guy that called, they talk to him first.
Right.
So I don't have the power to oppress. So in my opinion, I can be racially insensitive. I can be prejudiced. I can be a lot of things. I don't really have the power to be racist because I don't have the power to oppress. I can't subject you to a lower standard of living. I can't limit the schools that you can go to. I can't redline you into a neighborhood. When my parents wanted to move to Orange County, or at least they looked into it a long time ago, yeah, they were basically just kind of blackballed from the neighborhood. Right. That's racism. When you have that kind of power where you can keep a kid from going to a better school to better himself, and so you limit his educational opportunities, from elementary school on, that's effective racism to me. A black guy being mad at a white guy is not the same. And that's just my personal opinion. And I could be completely wrong. But yeah, for me, racism requires power.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that at all. I think that, I think so. Prejudice is a much more common thing, right? Everyone's prejudiced.
And the question is to what degree?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So and a part of prejudice is very necessary, right? Because that's how we develop. That's how we learn how to
It's
to
accumulated
protect
data.
ourselves.
Yeah,
Right.
like I tell my son, when you're driving in a bad area,
Right.
every car has the right of way,
Right.
because you have to assume that a lot of the people don't have insurance.
Right.
Yeah.
For
whatever reason. So you want to call that a race thought or a socioeconomic thought? Okay, you might be guilty of that. I'm fine.
Yeah.
But it's the way to bet.
Right. Exactly. Or a lot of stats with, and again, this is where sometimes when I see a story, I go like, was that a result of a prejudice that it could be valid but unfortunate that resulted into a tragedy, or is that racism? And so like a lot of times, again, I'm not saying this last one I think was racism. I think that's I think it's a huge deal, and I think that everyone should be very upset about that, and more than upset, they should be motivated to act. But the prejudice sometimes, like when statistically, if I don't know what these stats are, so I'm just gonna make some up. If there's a higher rate of when you pull somebody over that they're going to have a gun, and it's like double or triple, I don't know what they are.
Yeah.
Then you might have your hand closer to your gun. And if you have your hand closer to your gun, statistically, like maybe you're just there's a lot of things that like
trends,
prejudice,
yes,
and sometimes the prejudice is founded on like actually pretty logical thinking, and it doesn't make the person bad. It just means that they've been conditioned to accept this data that makes them react a certain way.
Sure.
Now, why that data is that way, that's when these small things add up to big solutions, right? And I think that, again, I think a lot of it's cultural, and I think we've made more progress on the cultural front than we have on the political front. I think politics holds us back from becoming together. I think politics actually is a lot of the power that's held is by keeping people divided and apart.
Yeah.
And I think they play to that pretty damn well.
Well, it's effective.
It is very effective.
It's divide and conquer.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, though. Like you touched on something that's very important. Perception and actual stats are completely different.
Right.
Like I saw a stat, and it was like a 3-year study that said, and it was in like Oklahoma. The white population was 49% more likely to have contraband in their car when stopped, but blacks were stopped at like 12 to 2 or 12, some weird number, like 12 to 3 ratio.
Yeah.
And there were more white suspects that were let go at the scene than there were black suspects that were let go at the scene.
Right.
There were more claims of physical violence against blacks, and there were more claims of resisting and evading.
Right.
When you see the history of police activity towards blacks,
And there's just and I don't want to cut you off.
oh no, I was going to say, but there's a history of violence,
Yeah.
whether it's supposed to happen or not. Like this last guy, the claim was that he had
Forgery, right?
he had written a bad check at a grocery store, and I guess it was unfounded. I need to do more research on it.
Yeah.
But even if it was 100% accurate,
Even if it was,
it's a
okay.
citable offense.
Like I said, like there's certain times where I'm like, well, what's the full story? What's more?
Yeah.
I don't even care.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's a citable offense, and,
Yeah.
and you can make an appearance in court.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be pull me out of the car,
Well-
handcuff me, and put your foot on my neck or your shin on my neck.
Well, what you're saying, it's very much the when it comes to the data of all of it, it's why is the data that way? And
Because the dominant culture decide. I mean,
well, it's trust, right? So that's what I was gonna say. Sorry, I kind of blinked for a second. If there's more, say if a black person's more likely to flee from a cop, okay, that there's more reason to give chase and maybe use more force, right? Because they're fleeing. But why are they fleeing? Because they don't trust that they're going to get a fair shake in what's going on, or they already feel afraid. And a part of that comes from a lot of the input saying be scared, right? And some of it's very, very valid.
Very valid, yeah.
And then some of it is like we have this like crisis culture where we're like becoming more fearful of the police is not a good thing. So what we need to do is create more trust. I'm not saying anything new. I mean, they've been trying to do this forever, but a lot of that's like having proportional representation in police force for the communities that they serve, right? That's like one solution. I think they've tried in certain areas.
Yeah, but it's here's the thing. Like, I was in Atlanta, and I'm one of those guys that feels unnecessarily safe, I think. And I will go out late at night and like photo safari or who knows what. I just check things out. And I was out later than I should have been. And I'm walking back to my little swanky hotel. I was on. What was I doing? I think we were doing a film. It was a lot of filming happens in Atlanta. I think I was there for Barbershop 3 or something. But I'm walking back to the hotel, and I see a police car come like out of an alley, and I'm walking on the street by like Peachtree Boulevard by myself, and it's like almost midnight. And right away I'm getting the spider senses tingling. I'm getting nervous. Oh gosh, darn it, here they come. And I'm expecting to be harassed.
Yeah.
There's no witnesses around, nobody to film this if this happens, and so on and so forth, right? They pull forward, and there's 2 black police officers in the car, and I immediately just exhaled.
Right.
And I looked over at them, and I waved, and they nodded, and they drove away.
Yep.
And I went, wow.
Yeah.
And my first thought was, this is what it feels like to be white.
Right.
Because that's usually how white people feel when they see the police. Oh, I'm safe now.
Yeah.
When black people see the police, it's like, oh boy, here it comes. What's about to happen to me? What kind of BS is going to happen to me, and how are they going to justify it?
Right.
So yeah, I think community policing is a great way to go. I think having representation, proper representation, is one way. I'm a big proponent of having fit police officers who can handle themselves.
Right.
Mandatory MMA or jiu-jitsu training, something.
Yeah,
for
because sure. You should have to be at least. I think you should be a purple belt if you're going to be a cop.
Hey man, the guys that can handle themselves aren't going to go to their gun fairs.
No. Absolutely not.
When I was a kid, my dad used to always warn me, and this is going to sound chauvinistic and
Bring it.
and height. This is going to have.
I can't be the only one putting my
I
foot
know,
in my
right?
mouth tonight.
It's going to have the heightest element. My father said, when you get stopped by police, the ones you got to worry about most are women and short guys.
Right.
He said
because they're not going to mess with you.
Yeah, he said they got to go to their gun first.
Yep.
He goes, unless they're the baddest sons of gun on the force, they got to go to their gun quick.
Yep.
So he said those are the ones you got to be very aware of.
Yep.
And try to be on your P's and Q's.
Mm-hmm.
And in my experience, it was twofold. I got that, and I also had like the really big cops who couldn't wait to throw their weight around. And you could tell maybe they were not like the greatest athletes in high school, but became much bigger and stronger after school.
Yeah.
And so now they could throw their weight around. I got the impression that guy yesterday was one of those kind of guys.
Yeah.
That now he's got some authority. He couldn't wait to.
Oh, dude, you could see it on his freaking
Yeah.
face. It was disgusting.
Yeah.
Kev, my wife is texting. Dinner is ready, and the kids are ready for bed.
Because you and I can go all night.
Yeah, I know. And we're gonna do this again if you're up for it. And
of course.
Also, dude, check this out. Look at that. Look at that. So, kids, this is Gumby. Okay. It's funny. It's
back.
funny. Kids will never know.
No,
Gumby.
Google it.
Yep. So this is going on the podcast forever, and we're gonna do this again.
Yes, sir.
I would really like it. Hopefully you'll come back
Are you
again.
kidding me? Anytime.
Oh man, and I could have done.
I'll tell you, like
I could have done the whole hour on just stand up comedy because I'm a huge lover of stand up comedy.
Yeah, we got.
And
well, today is a hard day to talk about.
It
There's a lot
really
of
is.
stuff
It
going
is.
on.
It is. There's too much. But when times get better,
Yeah.
we'll get back to that. Maybe we'll even pull up a video of one of your shows and
Okay.
kind of we'll break it down. We'll kind of go through it piece by piece, do a little play by play. That'd be fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, and then and thank you for the conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you for your ongoing input online, and never stop, man. Because
it's tough sometimes,
I don't always agree, but I like the fact that the conversation is happening.
Yeah, well, just remember, when you're not agreeing, you're probably wrong. I tell everybody that. If you're not agreeing with me, you're probably wrong.
Trust me. My wife has trained me pretty good, and I think I have that tattooed somewhere.
I hear you.
But thank you very much.
My pleasure,
and man.
Anytime. Yeah, because I appreciate you, bro.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you soon, and have a good night. Thanks for commenting in. Didn't get to some of those comments, but thank you guys very much. And Kev will be back, and we'll do it then. All right, guys. Take care.